Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I would argue that there's very few cooler intersections in the world today than the intersection between AI and creativity and people and storytelling and technology and all these cool things that come together. And that's why I'm so excited to get inside the mind of today's guest, because this is someone who not only operates within that intersection, but looking into his work, I can see that he not only thinks about today, but he thinks about tomorrow in really interesting ways, because whether we face it or not, the world is changing. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Roger Baldowski. Roger is a designer, a creative director, and the founder of Wildcraft, who's building a new kind of creative agency for the AI era. And what I love about his entrepreneurial beginnings is that he's doing this after more than 16 years at agencies across both Atlanta and New York City. While many agencies are bolting AI on top of existing offerings or adopting it superficially, Roger envisions a return to specialization in craft through technological transformation. Whereas a lot of people think that these are diverging things, Roger really views the converging nature of it. His mission is to create a forward-thinking, creative service that champions both cutting-edge tools and high-caliber talent, redefining what's possible for clients and creatives alike. And I think that all of that is the perfect intro. I'm very excited about this one, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Roger Baldowski. All right, Roger, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here.
Heck yes, there's so much fun stuff we're going to talk about today, but before we jump straight into that, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Roger? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, for sure, Brian. I'm located down here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I guess I like to tell people growing up, I have just lots of different interests. You know, it was hard for me to really sort of fit as a particular sort of archetype of person. I liked the arts, I liked sports, I liked history, I liked, all sorts of different things. And, all that sort of led me to design and sort of creativity as a profession, and sort of how, at the end of the day, it's all about sort of connecting dots. And that was something I was always really good at, and something that, kept me engaged in the work that I was doing, whether it was, sort of high level strategic thinking or sort of in the weeds, pixel by pixel approach. Like it was for me, the perfect vehicle to sort of express myself as a creative person, but also do it in a way that, had a clear goal in mind and sort of a strategy behind it. So I started my career at a small digital agency here in Atlanta. I was there a few years before it was acquired by a giant holding company, which is, a commonplace in sort of today's advertising industry. With that acquisition, I was able to move from Atlanta to New York, and stayed in New York for a little over 9 years and worked my way up the creative, org chart, and at various agencies and brands. At the time, I was connected with a writer who was my creative partner, and he and I really sought out opportunity around agencies with the people we knew, with the brands we knew, and ultimately were lucky enough to land at some great shops and do some really great work that, in hindsight, to me, the one thing that's always kept me in this industry is the people it attracts. It's full of often, wild thinkers and creative people who don't always fit into a box. And they're a lot of fun to work with. They're a lot of fun to, especially in the creative realm, to be able to ideate with and ultimately build, scalable ideas and campaigns and products and all those things. But, another hard reality about this industry that I work in is rapid transformation. And, I have been, unfortunately, a victim of layoffs a few times, and it's for me, it's been a good thing in that it's helped me, start fresh, but also reevaluate the type of work I want to be doing, the types of people I want to be working with, and what I know to be sort of the new way of creative services with the advent of AI here. So I guess first and foremost, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. That is something that I prioritize. But I'm also an avid outdoorsman. I love to fish in the rivers and lakes here in Georgia, and that's been sort of at the core of my own personal brand story with Wildcraft, and the way I'm trying to talk about myself as a guide for clients, and taking them through this uncharted wilderness that is AI and these evolving digital landscapes. So it's been a really fun first few months for me as an entrepreneur, and I'm really excited to share with the world what I think is going to be and will be the new way of working.
Yeah, I love that overview, Roger, for so many reasons, but especially because we're inevitably going to talk about that storytelling here today. And I wonder if it'll come up sooner rather than later, because where I really want to start with you is that we've all been told, you turn on the news and it seems to me like the creative industry is the one that should be most worried about AI. I don't know if that's true or not, but in talking to you both on the air here, but also off the air, seems to me like you get very excited about AI and all the technological transformations that are to come. Why is that? With your creative hat on, it just seems to me like you spot the opportunities there rather than the fear that so many different people are permeating out there.
Absolutely. I think to my earlier point about connecting dots, I think one thing I sort of experienced firsthand working at advertising agencies was, this sort of silo. There's a department, there's sort of a skill set, and everyone sort of fits into a box that makes up a project team or a client team that is sort of the heart and soul of what we're offering our clients. But as tools like Midjourney and Runway, and for me, Claude and other sort of deep search tools have become more accessible and sort of more democratized, it's all been about the upskill factor and the ability for me as someone who sort of knew my lane and knew my responsibilities. Like, now I'm able to do things in my work that required another team's input, or that required a team of people to get, more than one or two people, which ultimately, as you can imagine, is costs for the client. And so, I'm able to do things like animation and sort of larger sort of strategic ideation and journey mapping and things, and using these tools in different ways that, if you know the fundamentals about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve and the story you're trying to tell, these tools can help you do it. And it was a real eye-opener for me, because as learning the ropes in the industry and sort of working my way up to creative director, it was, I've had to work on lots of different types of clients with lots of different types of needs, with lots of different types of people. And, one thing now is this idea of consolidating so much inside of this technology and being able to not only drive it, what I'm doing, to be clear, is not automating creativity. I'm using AI tools to enhance what I can provide clients as a creative. And that's both, on sort of the asset and deliverable side, but that's very much also on sort of the upfront strategy side, and being able to sort of understand our audience and our marketplace and our channels in a much different way and a much more lean way. And at the end of the day, I think being able to sort of create a work that speaks in a more personalized manner to online audience, it's possible now with AI.
Roger, hearing you talk about that, it takes me back to the first time I ever played around with Midjourney. And for listeners who haven't played around with Midjourney, it's very cool, because even someone like me, who I don't identify as a creative person, certainly not visually creative, it's cool because the prompt starts with the word imagine, where you can just tell Midjourney, imagine, an alligator as a police officer. That was probably one of my first things. I live in Florida, and I think it shows with my first ever Midjourney prompt. And even in that, the fact that it could output all of these really high quality visuals, it was so cool to see that stuff come to life, and seeing my niece and nephew have Sonic, sitting in a coffee shop, and all these different things that you can imagine and bring to reality. Roger, it seems like a lot of people want to talk about that replacing creatives, replacing human talent, replacing all of those. It seems to me like everything that you're building with Wildcraft is really bringing things together. The converging rather than the diverging is that you believe that when you take talent, when you take human creativity, you combine it with the technology, new things happen. Talk to us about your mindset there, because I'm a big believer that the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. I would imagine that because you have these beliefs, you're starting to see the new way of operating. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think our role as creatives using these tools evolve now in a place where, we're truly curators. That's what we're doing. I mean, there's absolutely a science and a syntax in the way you structure a prompt and sort of the way you're able to sort of build an aesthetic or train a mood board, for instance, in Midjourney. But at the end of the day, like the human intervention, the human element in this process comes down to curation and being able to sort of pull down and put together the pieces and parts from these various models to illustrate, a broader, cohesive, brand identity or brand expression. Like that to me has been the secret sauce so far. As much as I like to consolidate, and I try my very best to consolidate tools, they're all running on different models and trained with different data. So, I'd be hamstringing myself to only focus on one. Like I'm very much have different tools in my workflow that I tap at different times to achieve different results. And I think one thing that really is exciting about that to me is the ability to be more collaborative with clients, let them in on the exploration. We're able to, really be transparent in the prompts we're using, the results we're getting, and have a real-time conversation with our clients about the merits of what this looks like, of what this could be, sort of, is it right for this one piece? Is it right for sort of a bigger picture approach for the brand? So I think that right now the possibilities really are limitless, and frankly, just the evolution of the technology itself is, as you well know, is so rapid that, what I'm saying today will maybe out of date, likely will be out of date in the next, week or two in terms of how these models are updating and the quality they're able to produce. I know Google with its Veo 3 model now has been blowing minds left and right in its ability to just, deliver high quality, consistency, sort of, there's a lot of talk about AI slop, right? But I think as we get better as creatives at using them and blending them with our own, not only perspectives on the work, but our aesthetic and our general creative strategy around what we're trying to do, those lines going to get really, really blurry. And I think, sooner rather than later, we're going to see AI content stand side by side with high production, high cost, big budget type stuff that, the value proposition there for a client's pretty clear, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's exciting from my perspective. And obviously I'm easily excitable, but I get to talk to entrepreneurs for a living who are pushing the envelope in all of these means. And that's why I want to expand our conversation and talk not just about the technology, but about the way that your agency, Wildcraft, is operating and why you're operating that way. And I want to read for listeners. It's straight from your website. It's a little blurb that I love how big it thinks. And that blurb says, "We guide brands through complex and diverse social media landscapes, charting strategies that harness the raw power of storytelling, design, and technology." And Roger, I think it's so fitting that right beneath that is you have just a little portfolio of images. And one that really caught my eye, listeners will probably think you have a lot of cool images there and visuals. But what really caught my eye was the refrigerator in the middle of a desert. And so for me, as someone who's consuming that type of content, obviously it's stark contrast having that fridge in the middle of an Arizona desert with the cactus standing tall right next to it. And for me as a potential consumer, let's say we were working with a refrigeration company, is that I picture not only how hot it is in the middle of the Arizona desert, but the relief that you have when you open that fridge, and it starts to make me view that product a little bit differently, as it can evoke emotions, which I think is so different from how people typically position AI and how people currently are having conversations around AI. Talk to us about how this fits into the world of creatives and storytelling and marketing and tangible business, because you've come from the agency world and now you're really seeing that transformation happen and bringing it to life for companies, for products, for different types of situations. Talk to us about why this stuff matters now.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe the most obvious answer to that question is economics. The traditional agency model is quickly becoming outdated in terms of how agencies are built, the types of products and services that they offer to clients, and the types of people that make up those agencies. When I was in New York at the peak, I was working at an agency that had over 900 people just in New York, not to mention their global footprint. So like you can imagine not only the overhead as an agency, but sort of just the general bloat in terms of agency fees from a client's perspective that brings with it. So I think there's a clear economic benefit to working this way. Now, that said, like quality is something that's of the utmost importance to me. And, we're definitely at the tip of the spear in terms of where I would say clients are, let's put it this way, their appetite for some of this work. I think they understand the strategic and economic upside, but when it comes to brand, like that's a very sacred thing, right? And like it or not, there's still a fair amount of unknowns in terms of working with some of these models and the outputs and sort of intellectual property. And, it's definitely my mission to work in the most secure and ethical way possible. But, I'm not sugarcoating the fact that like this space is evolving and there is inherent risks with working with some of this technology. But ultimately, the biggest upside in my view is going to be the ability to make sort of deep, meaningful relationships with clients. And as I said earlier, sort of have them as collaborators on the team and use these tools to sort of step through the creative process in a way that, can be very measured at times. It can be very fast when it needs to be. It can be very, calculated and measured as needed. So I think there's lots of different ways, and instances and applications for using AI technology with these types of services. But yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's all about curation. It's about blending it in with sort of a broader, more macro view as brand. I'm not only creating content and social. I'm doing a lot of work to create asset libraries and toolkits, right? It's not just about sort of a one-off deliverable for me. I'm trying to empower my clients with toolkits of different types of posts, different types of images that give them what they need to sort of build a higher quality, more resonant brand. And what we know is a super saturated marketplace right now. And so, I guess another point I think a lot about too is as these tools are more widely available to more people, it's and this connects right with the storytelling piece, I think, is it's going to be about people's ability to find, really meaningful human insights and create, work that speaks. And it can be, insider stuff. It can be niche markets and audiences and thinking, but like we're able to talk in a really specific way and to a specific audience, and at the end of the day, get lots of learnings, be able to inform our approaches and to targeting and the digital space, and just do more with less, which is exciting to me, and I think is going to be more and more exciting to clients in the future. But we're very much just getting to a point where I think clients are taking AI seriously. I think it's had sort of a, sci-fi, maybe somewhat gimmicky, a view from a lot of marketers up until the last few months, right? And I think people are looking long and hard about, sort of the operations of their own business and finding ways to incorporate these tools to augment their staff and ultimately just run a healthier business.
Yeah, Roger, use the word gimmicky there. Now, I want to pick on that because I actually totally agree with you in the fact that I'll just expand it, not even just in the visual and creative arena, but even just with AI in general. So many people have been using it as a gimmick of, here's my to-do list, help me make sense of it, or here's my content, come up with a content calendar for social media. And they're just using it for very basic things. We are very much starting to see entrepreneurs such as yourself and individuals just in their personal lives and careers starting to push the envelope in new ways to use AI. And it makes me think about I've always loved that concept from entrepreneurship, which says that you're always building two businesses simultaneously, the one that you have today and the one that you're going to have 5 years from now. What I think is really cool about clearly the way that you think and having this conversation with you today is that you fully acknowledge and accept that 5 years from now, this tech is going to be completely different. But what I really love about your business is that you're recognizing, but it's also here today. And we can do powerful things with it today. You're not waiting. I hear so many people at the time of you and I recording this, everyone's talking about, oh, GPT-5 is around the corner and it's going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I see people holding off, standing on the sidelines, waiting and saying, when this is available, I'm going to build a business that can do this. But Roger, you're out there taking action. You clearly see those tangible things today that are not the gimmicks that a lot of people have been exposed to on social media. What does that look like? And especially, I'd love for you to paint the contrast using your creative agency experience from your past life in the corporate 9-to-5 world. What does that contrast look like in the fact that now things are possible? How is it different from traditional creative agency work?
Yeah, I guess one clarification point on that. Agency creatives don't work 9 to 5. That's never been true. More like 9 to 10. But anyway, it's been really interesting. I'll tell you, in my personal experience with Wildcraft, I think the most traction and sort of the most deep interest I've seen has come really, perhaps not surprisingly, from small business. I think they have, sort of the lowest risk here and the most to gain in terms of trying something different, doing something to engage their audience and just honestly looking bigger and better than they probably are. So I think that's definitely been sort of one uptick. But in terms of how it relates to sort of traditional agency work, I mean, any legitimate digital agency today, and this is July of 2025, have adopted these tools. That's just, I think, table stakes. But what's interesting to me is going to be how these agencies evolve their services and sort of what the makeup of the agency looks like. Because, again, like I said earlier, like for the last, at least during my career, the last 16 plus years, it's been, specific departments where people have specific skill sets and do one specific type of work, and you just move it on down the process, right? And very much the assembly line kind of approach, right? But now the ability for designers to have to be able to write in the world of prompts and vice versa, for writers to be able to be able to not only prompt but curate the output and understand aesthetic and understand how to get the right type of output from these models is, to me, represents the new frontier. I mean, I'm lucky to have met some really great people in my career that are really smart, really savvy, and I continue to this day to engage with them in these types of ways because we're all figuring this out, we're all experimenting, but we know how the business works and sort of how we, connect with clients, how we build relationships, how we do work that's measurable, and ultimately sort of build a deep strategic relationship with clients is what I'm doing and what I'll continue to do here with Wildcraft. But as I said earlier, Brian, I think a big part of this is just the changing industry and sort of the changing economic dynamics around this type of work and trying to really embrace it and build Wildcraft AI first and use these tools, stay as best I can and we can on top of the evolution of these models. But it's more than just creating. I think it's also educating clients and it's not only, as I said earlier, sort of bringing them along sort of the journey of collaboration, but it's like enabling them to understand these tools and being able to use them in various contexts depending on the business challenge they're seeking to resolve, right? So I'm a creative, but one of the things that still to this day continues to blow my mind is using tools like Claude to mine deep insights and data and do some crazy things that traditionally would take strategy teams a few weeks to get together, competitive analyses, things like that, where like I can build an informed creative approach for clients in a way that's well researched, and in a way that is calculated and measurable, and I think ultimately creates these toolkits, right? As I said earlier, so it's exciting times on the AI front, and I'll tell you in full transparency, this is the first time I've ever really, as a founder, had to embrace biz dev for the first time. I've been on many new biz teams and done plenty of creative pitches for new clients, but building Wildcraft sort of built brick by brick with the clients that interest me, and the people I want to work with has been sort of at the core of what I'm trying to do. And because I this is the type of work I love, and is something that I've always had a lot of passion for, and I'm excited to see what's next with this stuff, and hopefully can continue to keep my finger on the pulse.
Yeah, Roger, I'm going to use that as a segue then to switch gears a little bit and totally put the spotlight on you and hear some of those insights, because you're right. Now you no longer are just a practitioner. You are a founder. You are responsible for business development, for marketing, for having those sales conversations, for all the back end stuff. And that's part, I would argue, 18 years into this journey, that's part of the fun of being an entrepreneur. How has that transition been like for you personally up to this point?
It's been interesting, Brian. I'll tell you, as someone who's worked in lots of different agencies, and I like to think I have a nice, healthy network of people I know, both ex-agency folks and clients alike. I'll say on one hand, I think this last year or last few months rather, have been tricky, just on the state of the economy and just a lot of the uncertainty with the tariffs, and I don't think that's helped sort of accelerate business development on that front. But it has been really encouraging to get the amounts of positive feedback that I've received, and I do give my pitch on a regular basis, and field commentary and take notes from prospects in ways that are helping me make this better, helping me make it sharper, and ultimately, carve out a space for myself in this industry that is I think right at a true inflection point. And much like I think it was a few weeks ago, or I was listening to a podcast, and people have been talking about, for years, it was all about learn to code. That's a safe industry. It's high demand. I thought starting my career in the digital space and as a creative, help would potentially provide me some sense of security. But it's been, pretty humbling to see how fast the industry has evolved, how fast technology has evolved, and, those sort of clinging on to the old ways of working, it's just not, frankly, something I'm interested in, and I'm excited to meet and continue to connect with folks I know, and friends of folks I know, and third and fourth degrees of separation here. But one thing I have found to be true and not surprising is it has been about your network, right? That's the most important thing you have, and I continue to grow it every day. But it's just, for me, hasn't been, I would say, it just doesn't necessarily come natural to me, but talking about this stuff and talking about creativity and brands and is something I have a lot of passion for. And I think, it's for sure in a place, poised to take off.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative of those insights. And most of all, I really appreciate your attitude towards all of it, Roger. And you talk about not becoming natural to you. And I'm just going to call it out on the air for all the listeners' sake that nothing's natural to any of us. It's reps. And so much of it starts with our mindset, and that permeates into the way that we operate. And Roger, you're such a shining example of that. And I'm so grateful for you sharing the real life insights as you undergo your own entrepreneurial transition. And I'm going to use that to put you on the spot just one more time here in today's conversation. It's the question I always ask at the end of every episode. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their growth journeys, and also knowing that not only are you pushing the envelope in your industry, but you are one of us. You just shared so many of those entrepreneurial thoughts here on the air. So with your entrepreneurial hat on, what's that one piece of advice you want to leave listeners with today?
It's a great potentially very deep question, but one thing that has forever been my North Star, no matter where I've worked, whether it's in-house at a brand or at a big digital agency, I've always tried to be nice. And that's just sort of inherent to the type of person I am, the type of parents I had, and treat people with respect. And it seems maybe stupid obvious, but specifically, I would say in creative services, oftentimes is full of really high ego people that aren't necessarily interested in that, and it's all about taking credit for things. And for me, it's about, I want to build, I want to connect, I want to bring people together and around this technology. And I've always tried to be nice and focus on the work. That's another thing I've told my teams for years. Like, don't get bogged down in all the noise. If you focus on the work, good things happen every time. So those are maybe two simple ones.
Yes, I love that. In a world where we have that anecdote of nice guys finish last, it's such a powerful reminder from you here, Roger. And I also very much subscribe to that chain of thought. And I've always embraced the fact that people don't always remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And Roger, having the chance to interact with you both on the air here today, but also off the air, it's so clear to me that that's the way that you show up. And I'll share this with listeners. They always love the behind the scenes stuff. And on your questionnaire before you and I ever got together today, what really stood out to me, here I am getting to interview an entrepreneur that's so deeply ingrained in the world of creative services, AI, technology, talent. But what really stood out in your questionnaire, Roger, is how much you value relationships and the people that you work with. And I think that shines through in everything that you do. And obviously the way you've shown up here today, even down to that final piece of advice. So listeners, look at what Roger not only is saying here today, but how he shows up. There's so many powerful reminders and lessons inside of there. So Roger, I'm personally excited for listeners to go forth and see the stuff that you're putting into the world, because here on a podcast, it's fun, but you work in a very visual industry. And I will say, as someone who loves consuming that stuff and scrolling through and actually seeing your work in action, it's a totally different experience. So for listeners who want to see more about Wildcraft and all the stuff you're up to, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out our website at wildcraft.ai. As well as we have an Instagram, Wildcraft AI, as well. So I'm the ones behind those channels and doing my best to sort of keep those alive. But feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk about AI. I'd love to talk about creativity, or I'd even more importantly love to talk about a creative collaboration. So thanks for having me today, Brian.
Yes, no, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Check out those links. You can click right on through wildcraft.ai. Super easy to remember. And I love how much it goes along with your personal life and the things that you value, Roger. So listeners, check that stuff out in the show notes down below. Otherwise, Roger, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.